Test. How does this sound? Hey there. Today we're going to do this a little differently. I am sitting in the car in the parking lot at my kid's school waiting for school to let out. So we'll see how this goes. Hopefully we won't have too many distractions. The reading for today was from 1 Timothy, which, I don't know, it's another Paul letter, and Paul's got something against... I don't know. I know that he's held up as this big saint and he gives all kinds of good advice and stuff. I don't know. I think he's kind of a misogynist. He might not be persecuting Christians anymore, but I think he's still kind of a prick. So, personally, without actually outright dismissing what Paul has to say, I tend to take it with a little bit of salt. So I'm not going to talk about that. A couple posts ago, and I don't remember which one. If I remember to, I can try to attach the link when I upload this. But a couple of posts ago, I shared a quotation from a book called The Prophetic Imagination by Walter Brueggemann. And again, it's another excerpt in the meditational book that I read. And I'm going to read it today because I want to talk about it a little bit. It involves the notion of compassion and social action. So it says, Jesus, in his solidarity with the marginal ones, is moved to compassion. Compassion constitutes a radical form of criticism, for it announces that the hurt is to be taken seriously, that the hurt is not to be accepted as normal and natural, but is an abnormal and unacceptable condition for humanness. In the arrangement of lawfulness in Jesus' time, as in the ancient empire of Pharaoh, the one unpermitted quality of relation was compassion. Empires are never built or maintained on the basis of compassion. The norms of law, of social control, are never accommodated to persons, but persons are accommodated to the norms. Otherwise, the norms will collapse, and with them the whole power arrangement. Thus, the compassion of Jesus is to be understood not simply as a personal emotional reaction, but as a public criticism, in which he dares to act upon his concern against the entire numbness of his social context. So again, we see Christ as a revolutionary. And I think it's important to constantly remember that he wasn't crucified for being Christ. He was crucified for creating social unrest. He was a dissident. And he was a threat to the established ruling classes, not just of Rome, but of the Jewish people. I think we need to think about where our power comes from. Now, we've talked before on this site about the instructions to be compassionate and loving towards everyone and what that might mean. In this context, I want to explore it a little bit more. There's an understandable leaning, I think, among compassionate-minded Christians to think that we need to vote always for social policies that are generous. And I don't really know if it's that easy. I often think of the line from A Christmas Carol from Scrooge when the collectors for the charity come by and they say, "Well, but sir, do you have anything to give to the poor?" And Scrooge replies and says, "I gave to the poor already. I paid my taxes." And, we all laugh at Scrooge and, oh, what a bastard, what a jerk. But, actually, that's what a lot of these social programs end up doing. They end up taking taxes and, being used for goals that are noble. I don't want to imply that these stated objectives are not good, because they are. But I think what happens is, soon as we involve a third party like the government, we end up removing our own sense of urgency in our own daily lives. We distance ourselves from the people around us who need our compassion. I'm not saying that we shouldn't also make sure that things like Social Security are well funded, or things like, it's horrifying that children don't have automatic access to vaccinations, for example. I mean, that's ridiculous. But just because something is important to change or take care of, it doesn't mean that it's anyone else's responsibility but ours. And I think that as people, we have a real tendency to say or to think that we voted for a certain social policy, therefore it's all taken care of, we've done our bit. I think that our voting is just the start of it. I think we need to vote with our consciences. So if you want to vote one way and I'll vote another way, that's totally fine. Do what you think is best, by all means. But whichever way you vote, don't think that that doesn't remove you or me or your neighbor from then rolling up your sleeves and helping your neighbor mow his lawn, or walking the kids home from school, or, you know, driving an elderly person to a medical appointment or the grocery store. It's not enough to just give money. You're supposed to give your time. And in proximity with other people, that is where our compassion takes root. We need to put faces, not faces of strangers we see on the news, but faces of people we know and live with the stories of need and want and pain. Then our compassion isn't just an empty pat on the back. Our compassion is real. And real compassion can change the world. Something to think about.